What is up, y'all? Welcome back to episode 78 of That's No Moon Pod. Just watched episode 5 of The Acolyte, so spoilers ahead. I thought this episode was the best episode so far, but I feel like that's not saying a whole lot just from what we've gotten in the previous episodes. We finally get pretty much a full on lightsaber battle episode. Given the fact that this episode was so short once again, it kind of got boggled down with the storyline. And I feel like the main takeaway from this episode was pretty much just how cool the lightsaber fights looked. I thought the overall choreography was a step above from what we've gotten from previous Disney lightsaber fights. That includes the sequel trilogy. I thought they did a pretty good job kind of mixing some prequel vibe Jedi fights and kind of blending it in with what we've gotten with previous Disney projects. I was curious to see if we were going to jump straight into from where we left off from episode 4, and that's exactly what we do. Osha wakes up after getting force flicked by this dark side user or Sith, and she's surrounded by these dead Jedi on the ground while the remaining Jedi continue to fight this dude who is super trained in lightsaber combat, and he's taking out all these Jedi one by one with ease pretty much. He does a cool move to where he stabs one Jedi and then kind of force pulls this other Jedi into the same kind of motion. It kind of kebabs these two Jedi, impaling them both. So there's some cool choreography going on with this episode with the lightsaber fights, which I enjoyed. And then there's this moment to where he has opportunity to take out Yord after kind of stabbing him in the leg, and Osha tries to set the stun blast this dude, and she takes off running, and then he does like his whole lightsaber throw, and that's when Soul comes back in, and they're having this cool standoff moment while Osha and Yord take off to head back to the ship, and it just leaves Soul and this dude kind of go one on one at each other. Meanwhile, we got Jeki and May back to where Kalnaka's cabin is at, the Wookiee Jedi, and Jeki's trying to apprehend May, arrest her, and take her in for questioning, of course. And they're having like this cool hand to hand combat style fight scene. And the whole time I'm thinking, all right, let's get back to this lightsaber fight because we've been waiting so long. I feel like this whole show for us to finally just get a full on lightsaber duel, lightsaber battle episode, and that's pretty much what this episode is. And Soul and this dude are kind of having like these conversations. He's trying to figure out who this person is, telling them to take off their mask, reveal themselves, and they're kind of jawing back and forth. So the whole time I'm wondering, are we gonna actually get the face reveal on who this dude is? And sure enough, we do. after the whole Jackie and May battle, that's when this guy pops back and tries to take out Jackie, and she's able to hold her own for the most part. And then once Jackie and Soul get back together, they're kind of having like this 2-on-1 fight with this dude. And then Jackie's able to kind of like elbow him in the face, kind of like cracking his mask off. But when she does that, she winds up getting stabbed multiple times in the chest, killing her, which I was super upset about because I feel like Jackie and Soul were really like the two characters in the show that you really kind of fully cared about. So it was sad to see Jackie eat it in the end, but she was able to unmask this secret identity of this dark side user or Sith. And lo and behold, it's Chimere, the dude who helps May wander through the jungle and this forest to help find Kalnaka's cabin. And I felt like that reveal was so predictable. People were already talking about Chimere being the person behind the mask ever since we were kind of introduced to him in episode 2, to where he helps make the poison to help kill Master Corbin. But just like his mannerisms and some of the things that he said and just the way he said things were leading people to believe that Chimere was going to be the person behind the mask. And especially after episode 4 last week, I really thought it's either Chimere or it's going to be the mother witch who carried the twins from episode 3. And it was just such a obvious choice. I thought it was too obvious for it to be him, that I thought maybe the show would kind of do like some kind of fake out to where it's making all of us think that it has to be Chimere so much that it doesn't end up being him, but that's not the case at all. So we finally get the identity reveal, and Soul and this dude are both kind of jawing at it again. And Osha is able to get Yord to go back and help Soul out, while May is still in the background trying to run away for whatever reason. And Yord swoops back in to try to help save the day, but he gets snatched up by this dude, Chimere, and winds up getting his neck snapped, Johnny Cage style, which was crazy to see. This dude just literally wiped out every single Jedi besides Soul that went up against him. And that really set Soul off. And he kind of uses his anger and tries to take out Chimere. And he's about to do it. And then Osha stops him from pretty much cutting his head off. Pretty much saying that's not what Jedi do. It's not the Jedi way. And they're kind of able to distract Chimere a bit. Osha swoops in and she puts her droid on the back of Chimere and she kind of turns on this like flashlight deal that attracts those bugs or whatever that we saw in episode 4, and those things swoop in and take Chimere out of the picture for a moment to kind of give this next scene that we get a chance to where Soul is telling Osha this whole thing to where he's going to explain himself to why it seems like he's hiding something from her. And that's when May swoops back in and set the stuns. Soul knocks him out for a moment. And we finally get like that interaction that we've been waiting on for the twins to reunite and just kind of talk everything out. And they wind up, for whatever reason, changing locations to where the sun's setting, and they're kind of having like this back and forth to where, no, you did it, no, you did it, you're in the wrong, no, you're in the wrong, you're my sister, let's get back together and kind of join forces or take my side, yada yada. And Osha is telling May, like, no, you're not a good person. You've done bad things. You need to pay for what you've done. And May decides to force push Osha, knock her out unconscious. And there's this moment to where she grabs a lightsaber on the ground and she decides to cut her hair with the lightsaber, and she's going to take Osha's clothes and act like she's Osha to Soul so they could head back and do whatever is going to happen in episode 6, leaving Osha there unconscious. But thankfully, that tracker creature, whatever that they were using, is able to find Osha's droid on the ground. And that's kind of where we see towards the end of the episode where May, disguised as Osha, is with Soul. They're getting back on the ship, and the tracker is pretty much following them along. And you're assuming that since he found Osha's droid, he's going to be able to help Soul figure out that it's not Osha, it's May disguised as Osha. And Chimere finds Osha laying on the ground. He's able to like somehow heal her wound or whatever. He puts like his jacket over her for some reason. And that's pretty much where this episode ends. Again, it's a really short episode again, like last week, which I do not enjoy, especially with the budget that the show has gotten. I feel like they should have combined last week's episode with this one. If you could have given us a full hour at least of this whole plot point in the show, but they want people to stay subscribed to Disney Plus, so they're trying to drag out as much as they can with this show. But basically, that was the whole episode. So let's talk about more of what I liked and what I didn't like, and kind of just the overall vibe of this show so far. Because what I like to do with these things, these shows, movies that I like, I go and watch certain people that I follow on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and some of them upload their reactions pretty quickly. And I like to get a gauge on kind of how the community is feeling, just the overall vibe of the show, what people are saying, to kind of just get an overall feel for what the audience is feeling. And this show is just doing something I've never seen before, to where there's just so much criticism and just so much different opinions, and just it's so divided. And I never let any other person's opinions or just what people think of the show affect on my feelings for it. But again, this show is just something else, dude, to where it seems like no matter what they do at this point, it's not going to be considered a fan favorite, that's for sure. And at this point, I'm tuning in now just to, one, be caught up with what's going on with Star Wars, because I love Star Wars at the end of the day. And whether or not the show ends up sticking the landing or not, I want to be able to come up with my own opinions and be able to come on here and talk about it and give my personal thoughts and share them with y'all, which I think no matter what, anyone should be able to do that with Star Wars or anything that they love. And so the things that I enjoyed about this episode, again, the choreography, the lightsaber fights, I thought were well done. I enjoyed finally seeing some decent lightsaber battles going on within a Disney Star Wars project. I feel like that's just been something that's really been lacking for whatever reason with these Disney Star Wars projects. And that's with the sequel trilogy, that's with Ahsoka, even with the Kenobi show. This episode I thought had some of the better lightsaber fights that we've gotten so far. But besides that, I mean, this story and this show, there's just so many things that don't make sense. I don't get a lot of the choices that are being made within the show. The main thing I feel like in this episode, the main talking point or takeaway was Chimere being this secret Sith. And I say Sith with quotations because when he's having that conversation with Soul, he doesn't necessarily name himself a Sith. He just says that he's what the Jedi would call a Sith or consider him a Sith. But he doesn't necessarily call himself a Sith. But that right there, I feel like just kind of stirs up so much more controversy that the show has pretty much already been bombarded with from the jump. So let's talk about that. again, he's not saying that he's a Sith, but the fact that he even said to Soul that he would be considered a Sith to the Jedi. Mundi is either just a straight up liar in the Phantom Menace, or Soul isn't able to make it back to Coruscant alive and to be able to tell the Jedi Council that, hey, I just encountered a Sith and he just wiped out all these Jedi by himself. So we got a problem here. But I feel like what's going to happen is Soul's going to figure out that May is disguised as Osha with the help of the tracker. And if you remember from, I think it was episode 1 or 2, Osha has a specific tattoo on her arm. And you feel like that's going to come into play to where Soul's going to figure out that May is disguised as Osha. And if you remember from certain clips that we've gotten from the show, Vanestra is supposed to be seen on this planet that just where we've seen this massacre of all these Jedi take place. So she's gonna wind up coming into play somehow. But I just don't understand how there being a Sith and the fact that all these freaking Jedi just got wiped out, and yet there's no feel for it in the Force by any other highly trained Jedi, aka Yoda, which they've said Yoda is not going to be appearing in the show, but you would think that Yoda would be able to feel within the Force that 10 Jedi just got slaughtered by some dark side user with a lightsaber, and they're not going to be able to get any of this information back to any of the Jedi. And that just goes back to what I was saying with Mundi. It just makes him seem like a liar from the Phantom Menace. And I've heard people talk about it's not breaking lore, it's not breaking canon, because we still don't know where the show ends up from this point. Which I understand that logic. We still gotta let this whole series play out before jumping to too many conclusions, but just the way that this whole show has been written and just the way things have gone so far with this show, whatever you think is kind of going on, I feel like you're pretty much going to be right. Um, Chimere being this Sith, I feel like he's not the big bad. I feel like he obviously has to have a master. If you know the rule of two, there's always two, never more. So, if you remember earlier in this episode where he was able to kind of use sort of that witch mind control, or to be able to get in your mind type deal with Osha. So I think definitely the witch mothers are going to come back into play somehow. Whether or not the mother who carried the twins is going to be actually the master of Chimere, kind of the one running the show. Which again, it's kind of getting a little too predictable at this point. But I feel like that's kind of what's going to happen. Um, I really don't understand how Soul can't feel that May is being disguised as OSHA. We've seen before that the Jedi are kind of easily fooled by people being disguised as something that they're not. Um, but if you want to say that the Jedi were with Palpatine this whole time and couldn't notice that he was this dark side user in disguise, you're talking about Palpatine, one of the most powerful Sith to ever exist, comparing him to May, who has these different just ways of thinking in each episode to where she set out to kill these Jedi, then her and Chimere get to the planet and she decides that she's going to turn herself in and not set out with the plan that she was intended on. And then she's having the fight with Jackie, who's trying to arrest May, but is deciding to fight against that once again. And then when she has that moment with OSHA, she's trying to be all goody goody with her. But OSHA still wants to take May in for questioning and arrest her for her crimes. But May is like, nah, I'm not about that anymore. So it's like the character development in this show has not been good. Soul is definitely the one you care about the most. I feel like he's the most layered character in this show because there's definitely something he still has to admit to OSHA. He definitely has more part in that whole massacre of her family and the witches and the fire. So he's definitely holding back something else that's going to make us think that maybe he's not who he says he is, or he's not as good of a Jedi as we're made to believe he is so far. And I'm curious to see how exactly all that plays out. But again, the show's been kind of predictable so far. So, whatever kind of theory or anything that you may think that Soul is hiding, you're probably going to be right. I feel like this whole show would be a lot better if you took out Amanda Stenberg's character of the twins of May and Osha. Again, May is just flip flop back and forth with what she wants to be doing. And Osha, I just don't care about her as a character. I really don't care about either one of them, to be honest. And I feel like if you took out their whole storyline in this show and we kind of got this murder mystery on this secret Sith or whatever that's killing these Jedi, and you have Soul and the rest of the Jedi kind of just doing this detective style Jedi show and completely leave out the twin storyline as a whole, I feel like the show would be a lot better because, again, I just don't feel anything for Osha or May. Their performance by Manila Stenberg isn't anything crazy or anything that I feel like should be highly praised. the writing and the dialogue so far is not very good in this show. And if you were on social media this past week, you saw that Amanda Stenberg took to Instagram or social media and she decided to release a music video kind of going at the people on social media and just the overall people that are kind of giving her and this show a lot of backlash. Uh, if you haven't watched that music video or listened to that song, I recommend you do just for kind of getting the context of this whole thing. But she's clearly not happy with the criticism that her and the show have been getting so far. And just the things that she says in the song make you feel like this isn't helping you out. It's not helping the show out. If anything, it's making everything worse. And she's kind of putting herself as someone who is being wrongfully criticized and kind of taking that sort of stance to where these people are racist or bigots or whatever you want to call it. Some of the things that we've heard from Kathleen Kennedy before, certain interviews as well, that if you're not liking this show, then you're an ist or you're a phobe, which I feel like is just such a crazy stance to take because if you look at the audience score for this show, it just keeps going down and down. The comment section and every post on Instagram and Twitter for this show are just complete trashing the show. It's a fire Kathleen Kennedy button. It's the Acolyte. It's this or it's that. And it's just crazy to see how much controversy this show has caused within the fandom. But last week I was talking about how, in a way, I'm hoping that this could be a blessing in disguise for Star Wars because they're going to have to look at the controversy and the audience score and just overall fan reaction for this show. And they got to realize that what they're doing is not working. The writing continues to be subpar, and just the overall storytelling and the appreciation or the just the overall care for the lore and already established storylines has to be taken better care of because it just seems like this show heard certain things and heard certain topics that were brought up from the Sith, from these twins being born by the Force, like Anakin, from again Kiadi-Mundi, his line in the Phantom Menace of the Sith being extinct for a millennium. It just seemed like this show took all those things, certain things that fans considered precious to them, and just overall lore and canon, and was like, we're gonna tiptoe around all those things to where it's not necessarily breaking canon or lore, but at the end of the day, it pretty much is. And again, the more and more we get with this show, the more controversy is just going to stir up. I feel like it seems like they're going to really try to make us feel like the Jedi aren't good people, I guess. Because again, Soul still has something to say, he still has something to get off his chest, and it's probably going to end up being him saying that he wiped out the witches, and that was sort of a way for the Jedi to get Osha, so that way the Jedi were able to train her instead of these evil witches or whatever. And I'm not a fan of the show trying to make us feel like the Jedi aren't as good as we once thought they were, and that the Sith actually have sort of a reason to stand up against the Jedi. Chimera has a certain line to Soul in this episode where the reason he's doing all this is that the Jedi don't want him to learn this power. Kind of going back to what the Jedi were doing with the twins and the witches, to where it seems like the Jedi are the only ones in the galaxy that are able to teach force sensitive children, or just overall teach in the ways of the force. So I don't know, dude. This show is just continuing to amaze me with how much they can stir up controversy, and I'm just gonna continue enjoying the ride of seeing how people react, and I'm gonna come up with my own opinions and my own thoughts like I always do. But at the end of the day, I am hoping that they're able to stick the landing with the show. I'm hoping that they're able to close out the series in some sort of fashion that doesn't completely shatter any kind of pre-established lore or canon. But so far, they've already done the complete opposite of that, I feel like, and they're going to just continue on doing this predictable storytelling with subpar dialogue and writing. But at the end of the day, we just got to wait and see. Let me know what y'all thought of this episode. Leave it down below in the comments. I want to hear y'all's thoughts. Like, comment, subscribe. But until next week, y'all stay safe, and I'll catch y'all on the flip. Peace.